konuşmacımız Dr. Andrea Zobel. I would like to invite Dr. Andrea Zobel, who will be talking about logistic in decentralized clinical trials. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. And sorry, I cannot understand Turkish, so hopefully I will not repeating something, otherwise you hear this in another language. Yeah, I want to talk about logistics and decentralized clinical research. You all know we have challenges in clinical trials. We have recruitment challenges, the demand for more patient diversity in clinical trials, and also the recent pandemic. This has changed how we are conducting clinical trials. And decentralized trials, remote trials, siteless trials, there are a lot of names for this kind of patient-centric clinical trials, but they all have it common. You are moving parts of the clinical trial execution to the patient's home. And this needs also logistics, because you need materials. You need the investigation in medicine a product, you need ancillaries, you need perhaps kits for taking specimen, and you have direct to patient and direct from patient shipments are required to conduct such a decentralized clinical trials. And this concept of decentralization is really one thing which is really accepted by many authorities. Here you see from the EMA in Europe, also they have a concept paper, concept to accelerate clinical trials in the European Union. And they mention also as part of the measures, more inclusive oriented medicine should be developed and delivery across population. And one part of this methodology is the decentralized trial concept. You find this in this concept paper as well. But when you are looking at the various agencies, we have seen already from the FDA, this concept paper, decentralized clinical trials. There were also before some call for the industry to enable more diversity in clinical trials, that more patients have access to clinical trials, and we have a more diverse population in clinical trials, which is more reflecting the real world later. The similar approach is coming from the Danish authority. This is the first country who have implemented the emergency guidances during COVID-19, which have explained a lot about how to conduct a decentralized trial. It was really the emergency situation. They moved it into the regular medicine and product law in Denmark, and also with the same objective. Regardless where a patient is living, the mobility of the patient, all patients must have access to clinical trials, also to have more diversity, a wider representation. When you look now at the EMA recommendation paper, it's a recommendation paper for decentralized trials. It's not a guidance, it's not a law. This was coming after expiration of the emergency guidances. They have a much more critical view on this. You see more concerns about safety of the patients, dignity of the patients, and any burden should be avoided. But regardless of this, they have published this recommendation paper. There's a lot of explanation how to conduct a decentralized clinical trial, and they have also a guidance for the investigation in medicine and product, how to deliver, how to store, how to administer at home. Very important for us. And the key messages about these IMPs as patients' home, one of the key messages, the investigator is responsible for the IMP. Even in a decentralized clinical trial, it's always the investigator. According to GCP, investigator has full responsibility, has also the right to reject a provider. Inclusion, exclusion criteria should also recognize the storage requirements at the patient's home. Think about how you are conducting clinical trials today, the traditional model. Are you really taking care, with exception of the instructions for the patient, how the patient is storing the medication at home? Today in a normal trial, the investigator should be informed about a delivery to the patient's home. Informed consent should include information about the processes and the patient's agreement to transfer the data to a third party, because when you want to deliver to a patient's home, you need the address at least. And when there is a complicated application, administration, healthcare professionals should support the patient at home. And then in this recommendation papers, there's a very interesting part. Several options. It can come from a pharmacy, from the clinical side, but it's up to the national requirements, national regulations, what is possible in each member state. And there is an appendix talking about the different member states. And please be aware, the working group who has issued this paper had representatives from each member state. And they together built this recommendation paper. Years ago, I had already, before the pandemic, I was asked to write an article for a regulatory journal, for RAPS, about regulatory requirements for decentralized trials, because this concept is not new. I have started with this around 12 years ago. And when I looked at the German regulation, as one example, I found out that here for prescription drugs, we have a quite good regulatory basis, with all the mail order pharmacies. It's very, very regulated for the physician, for the wholesaler, for the pharmacist, how to make it happen that you receive per order your medication at home, your prescription drug. When you look at the IMP, you just find in the Medicinal Products Act in paragraph 47 how that investigation in medicinal products can be stored at the clinical site. And then nothing else. For the dispensing, I had to citate ICH guidances. And for delivery to the patient, this is simply not regulated. There is zero in all the regulations. Pharmacy guidances, ordinances, nothing. And when you look now into the annex of the recommendation paper, you find a lot of from where the medication can come to the patient's home. From the clinical site, from a delegated pharmacy, there are a lot of options. And you see here, from each member state, a lot of green squares. So that obviously here, especially when it comes from the clinical site, it's allowed, according to this recommendation paper, by nearly all member states. Interestingly, when you look at the red, Belgium is included. We are conducting at World Courier a lot of shipments to Belgian patients in clinical trials. But it's red, not allowed. And Germany, as an example, is green. You have just seen it's not regulated. And this situation had also brought really an impact on a recent project. I don't know if you heard about this. There's a Trials at Home Consortium initiative. This is a European project. And when you don't know how a treatment is working, you conduct a clinical trial. And this is exactly the concept. The Trials at Home initiative is conducting the radial trial. The radial trial is with the diabetes 2 medication, approved, normal drug, and there are 3 arms. And the only difference between the arms is the way how the trial is conducted. There is a traditional arm, patient is going to the site, as always. There's a hybrid arm. Parts of the visit are transferred to the patient's home, and there are also some digital tools. And then there's a third arm, fully virtual. The patient is never going to the site, never sees the investigators, all via digital tools, e-consent and all of this. And of course, the medication is sent by a central pharmacy to the patient's home. And then this situation, this regulatory gap in the German law causes a problem. Germany is the leading agency, the BfArM is the leading agency in this radial trial. They gave green light, they have approved the protocol, have organized everything. But for the third arm, for the fully virtual arm, the drug must come, the IMP must come from a central pharmacy. And in Germany, we have a federal states, and the federal state inspectors are responsible for pharmacies, wholesalers. And then in Saxonia, during setup of the trial, it happened that then the inspector of Saxonia said, here, paragraph 47, there is nothing about delivery to the patient's home. It's not regulated. Therefore, you cannot conduct the clinical trial. It's not regulated. It's a gap. you must amend first the Medicine and Products Act before you can conduct the trial. And I had really the honor and pleasure to be invited by the BfArM. They conducted a clinical trial, a decentralized trials day. I presented about the logistics, here similar what I'm telling you, to these BfArM and all the industry initiatives and inspectors. And later on, they invited me also to their working group. There's a working group for the implementation of decentralized trials and clinical trials, also with a representative representing Germany in this EMA working group, and exchanged the same. And now it's really great. They've come afterwards to the conclusion to allow the radio trial. And what's really great, in the pharma strategy of the German government, there's a lot of things included to improve the situation for clinical trials and for, in general, for the pharma industry in Germany. This includes also special distribution channel for medicinal products dispensed in clinical trials, expanded to include the direct dispensing of medicinal products to trial participants. And now, it was just as really latest news a few weeks ago, the Medicinal Research Act was published, and the paragraph 47 in the Medicinal Products Act should be amended to include these deliveries to patients. To be honest, on the right, this is one German sentence. Google Translator fails to translate this because it's such a complicated sentence. Even I, as a German, there's a lot of possibilities to interpret this, but the intention is really to explain who can provide the medication, pharma companies, wholesalers, investigators, physicians, and so on, but only when patient safety and data validity are not compromised. Measures assure that the sponsor has no possibility to identify the trial participant, and the competent authority has approved the protocol. But really great, we have it now. And you see really, regardless of these regulatory situations, we have a lot of experience with direct to and from patient shipments before, in, and after the COVID-19 pandemic. And when you look at 2016, 20, and 21, Belgium was always included, although obviously it should be not allowed. You have a lot of countries here which are allowed and have done this for years. And Turkey was always under the top 20. Yeah, in all the years, and also last year in 23, when this is just from my company, from Cencora World Courier, the data, because we are delivering thousands of these shipments across the globe, and to patients' homes, from patients' homes, the majority is really, to patients' home, and 40% is IMP, investigation in medicine and product, and again, Turkey under the top 20. Yes, so it's really a lot ongoing, and I would say nearly all countries where clinical trials conducted, at least one or two protocols had been conducted in a decentralized method. So what have we to assure, really from the practical point of view, for direct to and from patient shipments? The integrity of the investigation in medicine and product, oversight of the investigator, and the protection of the patient's data privacy. And please compare. We have three methods how an IMP can come to the patient. First, at the site. Yeah, they have a lot of drugs, you have to administer them at the site. But the second, which is really common, is the patient is getting the medication and then brings it to their home. Yeah, by bus, by car, whatever. Perhaps in a cool bag when it's biological. And then we hope that the patient is following the instructions. We have no data about how it is delivered to the patient's home and how they are storing it in a traditional clinical trial. And then you have the third, the new method, that the medication is handed over to a qualified courier with a qualified validated boxes with a data logger in it, brought to the patient's home, handed over to the patients or a nurse or whoever is really dedicated to take over, and then the data are transferred back to the clinical site for filing. Yeah, think about what is the safest way for the drug, where you have the most of the data. And we can really manage this process with assuring the data privacy. And the requirement is really that when we have a dispensing visit, and normally a randomization system, an IRT system, is deciding which kids, which numbers are given to which patient number. And the pharmacist is putting this together, and then you need ordering with a courier system, but just with a patient number and where to pick up. Not to whom. This data is coming from the site because only the site, only the investigator knows the patient's identity and the address. And then in the whole courier system, we have to hide the information, that only a very limited team has access to this information, especially the driver, because the driver must know where to pick up and where to deliver, and to whom hand over. And the rest is really blinded. We have only confidential is popping up, and even in an invoice, the sponsor cannot see where it was delivered, only for which site and perhaps for a patient number. And then also the data are sent back to the clinical site, that they can file everything. Of course, we have a lot of potential. This was already mentioned. I have understood this, even I cannot understand Turkish, about the digital solutions. Yeah, why not? And some IRT providers have already the function to translate a dispensing order into a shipment order and offer for the site the possibility to give in a protected way the patient information also into the IRT system, and which system is better prepared to handle randomized blinded data than an IRT system. And this is then combined and placed the order in the courier system. Again, the confidential information is hidden. There's also a lot of potential to use digital methods. Yeah, when we are ordering food, when we are ordering a pizza, we know where the driver is. Why not making these tools accessible also for patients or for home care, for nurses in a clinical trial? And then we can also feed back the shipment data again into the IRT system. And the investigator has always full oversight of the whole process. So there are a lot of considerations how to set up a clinical trial with direct-to-patient deliverers. Of course, the clinical protocol must include this and also have really ethical, really good explanations why it is good for the patient and the conduct of the trial to have this method. At the end, it's still, with a lack of regulatory basis in most of the countries, a case-by-case decision. Yeah, Etic committees' approval are always important when there is a direct contact to the patient. We need in the informed consent the wording. Yeah, patient must agree. The data are transferred to a third party. Also, the handover of the study drug and the pharmacy regulations must be considered. So at the end, the patient is informed and agrees home deliveries, agrees when home care is included with his home care, and the data transfer. And ideally, the patient has a choice, because it depends on the patient if they prefer to go to the clinical site or prefer, perhaps better to get a 25-kilogram shipment instead of picking this up by themselves. Yeah? So it's really the choice. And investigator is fully informed, involved, has oversight, can fulfill all requirements regarding GCP, and also approves home care nurses in case they are in the delegation log of the site. And the investigator should also have access to the qualification of the nurses that they can accept, and this is part of this, like an extension of the trial team. The pharmacist can also fulfill all the responsibility a pharmacist has according to the local law. Receives the dispensing order like a prescription of the drug, and the sponsor has no access at all to the patient data, to the patient's identity, submits a protocol describing in detail the decentralized concept, receives all data required according to GCP, and qualifies and contracts the vendors. And the courier, as the most important vendor for delivery, has processes in place really which are assuring data confidentiality, patient confidentiality, and has trained drivers who are doing exactly the right process, handing over to the right person at the right time, and not starting any, for example, health-related discussions, or disclose the participation of the patient in a clinical trial. So Very important that everybody is fully informed. So what do we need to conduct future decentralized clinical trials? We really need this regulatory framework, yeah, in all countries, yeah, with standards for DTP and DFP. And the exchange between international, national organizations, physicians, authorities, vendors, suppliers, this is really helpful. And the recent example in Germany really shows how helpful is this exchange. Yeah? Also the EMA example. Digital solution, we need them really go away from paper and what we are doing on a daily basis. We are doing online banking. We are doing very sensitive things in with digital tools. These can be made available for clinical trials so that at the end we have a standardized, flexible, and permanently improving processes in clinical trials. Thank you so much. And when you have any question, come to me.